Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Live Your Impressivity Show. I'm Alex Badita, I'm your host, and this season is all about journaling for leadership. Today I have a surprise for you because we are talking about a different kind of leadership, emotional leadership. My guest today is Rick Gabrielly. Rick is a passionate husband, father, coach, author, podcaster, and American wellness entrepreneur. His limitless enthusiasm, love of technology, and exploration of energy medicine inspires and motivates others. By choosing love over fear, Rick creates an environment of high vibration possibilities to help others uncover, cultivate, and celebrate their own unique gifts. Rick Gabrielly is a visionary, and along with his wife Carol, co-authored the book The Currency of Connection. Rick is also the regional director of Master Networks. He's a speaker, author, educator, and the co-host of the podcast The Road Ahead Cafe. Make sure you grab a pen and paper and take notes during this episode because it's going to be delicious. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts afterwards and know what you think about emotional leadership. In the meantime, let's meet Rick. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Live Your Impressivity Show. I am so excited to welcome you to a new adventure, and today we are talking about emotional leadership. And I'm super excited to introduce you to my guest today, Rick Gabrielly, and to allow his wisdom to be shared with you, because I have to tell you, from the moment when we met and every time we interact, there is just so much going on. Even now, before we started recording, we had such a delicious conversation that we were thinking, oh, we should have pressed record already. Welcome, Rick. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's always such a pleasure to be with you.
I have to say that I was really impressed and really touched with your presentation during one of the networking meetings that I attended. And it was so beautiful to learn more about emotional leadership. And it made me think a lot about what we can do to support leaders today and how important it is to be more in touch with that side of us. But before we get to that topic, I would love to learn more a little bit about you and to ask you first, was it always that you had a soft spot for personal development, or was there a moment in your life, a turning point, when this became something very, very important for you?
Great question, Alex. So as a child, I was always playing and looking for joy and wonder. And as I started to grow up a little more, go to school, find, like studying and requirements, and my parents were trying to kind of groom me to, be a more well-rounded human being. I started to find that life could be serious, and I didn't like it. I didn't like that at all. But like most children, we have to go to school and do the things, do our chores around the house. But I really was very rebellious against any of the structure of life. So I always wanted to just kind of wander and think independently and kind of be in that spark and that joy. So when I was 19, right after my first year of college, my dad passed. And this was a huge trauma for me. And it kind of really just shocked me. So for about the next 4 or 5 years, I was really off track. And my high school biology teacher wrote me a letter. And this is kind of like the beginning of what I call the period of the life-saving power of connection in my life. I somehow found a spark from that in my own value. I really thought, if he felt that I was this important, and it really was like a switch went off in my head and my heart, and something changed in me. And I also met my wife, Carol, right after that, about a year later. So I was, although I might say I was going down a different path, it was closer to the path I was on as a child. I was able to dream again and live in joy and wonder. And that kind of got me started really knowing my purpose was to inspire people and love people and really lead with love instead of fear.
I love that. Isn't it amazing how divinity works through people and we get messages through people that we encounter, and that it's never a coincidence that we meet someone in our life and they always carry messages, and somehow it kind of gives us a nudge towards the right direction.
Yeah.
And I love what you mentioned about choosing love over fear, because I read that at the beginning in the introduction as well. And I would love to know from your perspective, how does this choice of love over fear can translate into business and leadership?
Well, when I got into sales after I met Carol, I was running my father's auto body shop for a few years. And she said, I think you really should, use your education more, put a suit on, go sell something, do something, to try to be in a independent, more education-based business. So when I got into sales, I also found more structure and lots of rules and hot lists and sales forecasting and things like numbers that really did not resonate with who I am as a person. So once again, I rebelled against the system and started to build relationships with my customers that were completely based on love. I have a very good story. The gentleman I went to work for at that time, his name was Al Kirshner. He was very similar to my father. He really looked like him. My father was Italian, Al was Jewish, and they were very similar. If you see pictures of them, they almost looked like the same person, down to the hairstyle and the sideburns of the day, big mustache. And he had the same kind of vibration. So I gravitated to him. So I came back to the office one day after my first order as a brand new salesman, and we had a little interchange. So he asked me, tell me about the call. What happened on that sales call? So, what did you say to the prospect? Well, I said this, and what did he say? He said that, and what did you say? And what did he say? And so we went back and forth. And then he said, and then what did you say? And I said, and then I asked him for the order. And he said, stop right there. He said, do you remember how you felt right before he said yes? I said, yeah. How did you feel? I felt like I would do anything if he would just say yes and buy this fax machine from me. And he said, all right, I want you to bottle that feeling. Remember how you felt right before he said yes. Because a year from now, when he calls with problems, I want you to remember exactly how you felt before he said yes. And this love came over me, and that kind of locked in and anchored that feeling. And I've never lost that. So now every interaction is the feeling of right before someone says yes to you, that anticipation, that love, that joy, that uninhibited, limitless giving. And I do that long after the sale, long after the relationship. So I'm always in that opening phase. I'm never in a closing. I'm always in an opening.
Dear listeners, I hope you are taking notes, because this was a sales training that you will not hear anywhere else. Thank you so much for sharing that. What a beautiful story. And I think that's really powerful to focus on that feeling of love and actually building those connections rather than focusing on the end result, the sale. Yeah. And when it comes to emotions in leadership, very many times people think that leaders are supposed to be cold, to not share their emotions, to never show what they're actually feeling. But now we actually learn that, well, you know what, in fact, people connect with people. So in any interaction, and especially in business, we need to have that emotional connection as well. So can you share with us, Rick, what is your perspective on emotional leadership? How can we see that in leaders today?
Sure. So I'll use another illustration, Alex, to explain my vision of this. So imagine you just become a very successful person in any area of your life. It could be personal, it could be professional. So you're just rising to the level where, that crossroad of, your passion and your enthusiasm and your wisdom and education kind of intersect. And you're at that point where you're now starting to feel it. It's that what we call subconscious expertise, right? Where you really know what to do without thinking, and you're just kind of going through the motions and it's all working. And so someone comes to you, even a family member or a person in your life, and says, I would like you to lead now. I want you to either be the leader of this family, the leader in this company, the leader in this community service activity that we're all engaging in, and you're going to step up. So now you have this unbelievable opportunity, but you may think, well, I don't really have the knowledge to be a leader because I've never done it before. So how do you get leadership knowledge and how do you get leadership training when you haven't been a leader yet? And the answer is we're all leaders, but we don't know it yet. So the fact that someone saw this in you is proof that you're ready. But here's a terrific illustration. Imagine, if you will, a horizontal scale goes from very, very cold to very, very warm. So maybe fear-based and love-based. So you think as a manager, well, you're always told, don't get too close to your people. You can't mix business and pleasure. You have to be careful. We're in a very difficult world right now where any kind of closeness can be perceived as a threat, and people are litigious. And so you have lawsuits. And so we're told to basically distance ourselves. And then you have this other side, which may be more of an old world view, or maybe even an alternative view, which is completely based on love, completely based on connection, completely based on organic leadership, which is really to lead by example and shine your light on people. And it's not as much like a dominant leadership as much as it is a walking alongside someone. So if you're a new leader and you're listening or watching and you're thinking, all right, Rick, well, where am I on this scale? So if you're all the way over here and you like it and it's working for you, then fine. If you're a cold leader and you just like separation and you want to maintain that hierarchy and it's working, that's great. But if you're in the middle somewhere and you're saying, wow, I really don't feel like I can be as effective, and I sometimes I'm cold and then sometimes I try to be warm, but I'm kind of feeling like it's an up and down thing and it doesn't feel good to me, then maybe you need to move all the way to the other side and choose love completely and say, how can I lead with love? And that's a vibration. It's not a romantic love. It's not a threat to people. It's rather supportive and elevating. So when you really think about people and you see them as they can be and love them on an energetic level, as a vibration, as a choice, as an intention, that's when you'll start to see those people also step up and become leaders. And the goal of any leader is to create leaders.
Love for people. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Loving the people. And I think this is the key. And especially nowadays, when we're learning more about authentic leadership and being vulnerable and really having that notion of emotional intelligence in order to manage our emotions and to be able to manage the relationship with others through emotions. In your experience, Rick, what is the best way or the road that people take from one side of leadership towards love when they are, maybe, as you said, maybe they are a little bit undecided or they don't have a specific leadership style, but they would really like to be closer to their team? What would be the practical parts that they can start implementing?
Thinking, hey, listen, I do have gifts inside me. It is each of our responsibilities to uncover, cultivate, and then celebrate our own gifts and the gifts of those around us. So trusting that your heart is really the center of all of your gifts, and knowing that the heart is 600 times more powerful than the brain. So if you're trying to think this right now and say, here's how I'm going to figure out how to be a good leader, this really does come from the heart. So you can trust that your emotional center, your heart, your thoughts, feelings, and then the actions based on those are really what's going to guide you. So trust the inner alignment. So you asked, how can we do this in a practical way? Anabolic energy, constructive, expanding, healing, and growth oriented, and catabolic energy, draining, resisting, and contracting. We've all experienced all these energy types. So clearly we want to be in the space of anabolic energy. So it's the preferred energy of leadership at work and at home. So what does it feel like to be in that anabolic leadership state, in that energy state? It feels like you are doing something right. If you're not a very thoughtful and feeling person, maybe you need to take some time. We spoke before we hit record today about slowing down this year and how great that felt to get off to a start that wasn't based on, just sprinting and jumping out of the blocks for our New Year's resolutions. My New Year's resolution was to not do anything in the beginning of the year, and I crushed it. I did such a great job. So think about some of the things that maybe make you feel a little bit better. So if you're listening and watching, maybe just sitting and thinking for a minute and listening to that inner voice could get you on the right path. Of course, reaching out to either one of us is a great way to get started. Have a conversation with someone who has done it before you. You don't have to do it alone. I think a lot of people feel when they get into leadership, oh, well, I'm a manager now, so now I'm that, alone person, and all these people are my team and I have to manage them. And we look at it like, maybe shepherding, where all the sheep are in this little pen and we have to get them all together. And it's not like that at all. You're still a person. You're still with the other people walking alongside, I think is a great metaphor.
Thank you so much for all the beautiful actions and shares, because I think that many people can, on a subconscious level, feel that they would want to do more, but on a rational level, they don't really know what steps to take towards being that leader who is closer to their people. And I usually share this as well with people when I talk about leadership journaling, that having a practice in place where you support your team to share through maybe a practice of journaling, for instance, or having a team meeting where everyone can share things and feedback and honest, transparent feelings that they have, is definitely going to reinforce that bond. And I remember you were also mentioning something that really caught my attention last time. And I made a note now also about the anabolic and catabolic energy. And I remember you were talking about the energy leadership and the emotional leadership, and how can these come together, or what is something that, again, can be practically implemented? How are they good to be in place for teams, for leaders, for people who are in business and they want to do things differently?
One of our good friends, Dr. Joshua Burka, says managing your own personal energy is the new healthcare. So if you think about that for a minute, what does our own energy look like? So those days where you just wake up and I don't have any energy, I don't want to do this, I just don't feel like, fill in the blank. It could be for a lot of reasons. So managing that personal energy, which is really the only thing we have an option over, is the key. And knowing your mind, body, and spirit, which again takes getting quiet, it takes looking within. The answers to all these questions that Alex is asking today are not outside of us, they're all inside of us. So as she mentioned, journaling as a way to go within, thinking and meditating as a way to go within. And you don't have to be a yogi to meditate. People often ask me, Rick, when do you meditate? And I say, I'm meditating right now, because my interactions and my connections and my conversations to me is a meditation. So I'm actually in a state of joy and gratitude while I'm having this conversation right now. So what are the ways to keep your energy up? Stay inside, stay in that inner wisdom, stay in gratitude. Whatever the opportunity is that's in front of you, it's something to be grateful for. You may not see that, but I always use the quote, be grateful for what you have on the way to what you want. So that's one way to manage your own personal energy. And then in terms of the emotions, try to be level. I don't get too high when things are awesome. I don't get too low when things are really horrible. I kind of stay in that middle ground. I was not always like this. I was always overly excited and then overly crushed with disappointment if my expectations weren't met. So I was able to really work on not having outside expectations and not being attached to the outcome of how things are, but rather having more expectations just of managing my own personal energy. And therefore, no matter what happens outside me, which I'm not in control of, I'm not disappointed and I don't feel overly elated. It's not like I don't show excitement and gratitude, but I don't fall into the trap of thinking this is going to be like this forever, both if things are awesome or if they're horrible.
Balance.
Yeah.
Having that balance.
And I also want to share, I do want to mention the book Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. This is one of my top 5. I go to it on a regular basis and I refer to it all the time because that's where he talks about these levels. And, just using love as an example, as a vibration, it's the level of 500 on this scale of 0 to 1,000. And if you stay in the level of 500, just by being loving, one loving person vibrating at 500 can overcome the negative effects of 750,000 people vibrating at the lower levels. So when they say one person can make a difference, it's really true, not only metaphorically, but energetically.
Do you think that loving leaders are born that way, or can they become loving leaders?
I think when we come into this world, we are loving beings and we are, open for any experience, and we're kind of like that lump of clay, the raw material. And so I think, although we may have some DNA in us and some programming, I think 99% of who we become is based on our environment. So I would say that anyone can become a loving leader. And somebody may be listening today who says, but Rick, I don't want to be a leader. I'd only want to be a person kind of going through this world. And that's fine too. So, leadership is really not, doesn't have to be managing people. You can be a great leader in your own life and just lead yourself the way you choose. And, we don't want to by any means make this seem like a requirement, that you have to elevate to some level to be validated and to be valuable. This is just, leading your own life and your own energy how you want.
That's a really good point. And I'm glad that you mentioned that and that you cleared that up, because I think many people have this fear of thinking of themselves as leaders, and without realizing that they are leaders, as you said, in their own lives. Like, we are leaders in everything that we do. Even at home, in the family, we can be leaders for the specific tasks that we do, the way that we bring love and connection and all of this, how we manage relationships with close people and with friends, with everyone around us. And I think that's really important. And from what I've seen, a lot of people are just still feeling that fear of showing up. And I'm thinking probably the transition takes time, really embracing the emotions, really understanding that there is a way to show up as an emotional leader, human being, and embrace that with full authenticity without feeling that you're weak. Mostly, people look for steps, processes, formulas, how to get there. And I think it's a matter of more like building that as a lifestyle and finding the habits that will reinforce that. And I love that you mentioned earlier, meditation and yoga and mindfulness and journaling, because these are great habits. What other habits do you have in your life, and other habits that you would recommend for people to bring in, for them to manage their personal energy and for them also to show up in this beautiful way?
Thank you, Alex. One of the things I was just thinking as you were talking was, I remember this arc that I went through where, as I was approaching structured leadership roles, I was very worried about being good enough and being able to succeed in those, because usually we have some level of success before we reach these structured leadership roles. So we've done well in some area in order for someone to then want to bring us, promote us, elevate us, grant us, appoint us. And then we start to feel nervous that we may not be able to achieve the same levels of success. So I remember feeling like that. And it was many, many years and many, many different leadership roles, some that I wanted more than others. And then all of a sudden one day, and I think this was from watching a lot of leaders around me and the way I felt with their leadership, maybe being more of that ego-based leadership where they took it seriously that they were the leader, and then they kind of stayed above the people as opposed to walking alongside them. I realized that was never going to be my style. So I was going to be that leader who was with the people, not above the people. So this is very important to find in your own life if you're listening and watching. Maybe you want to try to figure out which one you are and what makes you vibrate higher. What is your best place to be? Where are you most well aligned? Where does it feel right? Does it feel right for you to lead from above, or does it feel like the best thing is to lead with people alongside them? And so when I discovered that I could stay with the people and be a great leader, that felt much better to me, because I didn't appreciate the people who led from above me my whole life. That didn't feel good to me. But the ones who led alongside me. And what's interesting is when I was in school, I remember a teacher, I think it was ninth grade algebra. Oh no, geometry. Mr. Larkin, he came out into the classroom instead of staying up by the board. And he came and he stood behind right next to me and put his hand on my shoulder and spoke to the class from that point sometimes. And I remember how grounded I felt, because he went from the front of the room where he was above us to the chair side where the kids were sitting. And then he would interact with us and teach from that place and look at the board with us. And so I remember how much more engaged I was and grounded, not only by his hand, but by his presence and his heart. And I had all straight A's in his class. And I never forgot that. And I always talk about him as one of my favorite, maybe top 5 teachers. So the ones who, walked alongside us in life, if that's a great place to teach from and lead from, and that's not leadership from above, and that's not leadership from dominance, that's leadership saying, I've got you, let's do this. And it's more of a connected leadership. It's just, I'm one step forward and I'll help you get to that step along with me.
That's really powerful when you think about role models and how important it is to have these role models who help us shape and understand who we want to be and what really resonates with us. And I love that you mentioned the word connecting and having that connected way of relating to people, because I want to also mention the book that you wrote with your beautiful wife, Carol, The Currency of Connection. And you have this beautiful, inspiring story, and you also wanted to share this, with the world and bring everything that you've learned into this book, The Currency of Connection. So can you give us just a few ideas about what does it mean? What is this exchange in connection?
Sure. So thank you. Thank you so much. So, connection to me is it's such a spiritual, energetic level. And, to use the word currency, a lot of people, when they hear currency, they think of money. And when I hear currency, I think of value, and I think of meaning, and I think of energy, because this type of currency is more like current from electricity, from the energy. So the currency that I'm talking about is that energetic connection between people, and it's a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, metaphysical energy. And so this type of currency brings us great value when it's at work in our life. I call it a perpetual motion machine. It's like that tree that makes its own water, sunlight, and air, and it just continues to grow. And that's how we can be. So when we use the currency of connection in our lives, we can actually create more energy, value, and meaning. And that gives you a lot of purpose. It can help you create abundance, a lot of joy. And none of those things are exclusive of each other. There should be no life that you have too much of one and not enough of another. You can create whatever you want with this type of connection because it allows you to be the one who's in charge. It's not fate. It's not some elusive formula that, well, this life I'm not going to have love or I'm not going to have money. You can actually have all of the things you want in life if you just connect with enough people and help them find their gifts.
I really like that you mentioned that currency is actually about current and energy, and it's not about what we think, that, well, for connection, I have to give something in exchange. I have to sacrifice something else to have connection. And it's really, really powerful. And we're going to link the book in the description. So anyone who wants to read it, to order it, they will be able to do so. And connection is something that you're an expert in, I would like to say, because it's also what is at the foundation of another project that you started with Peter and Frank, the podcast that you guys have. And I recommend it to everyone listening because whenever I listen to an episode, it really brings me so much joy and it really lifts up my energy. And it's so diverse and it's so interesting to see how different topics are approached from this perspective of self-love and connection and relationships and collaboration and all of these incredible ways of looking in a different way at things around us. So what would be, for instance, the biggest lesson that you got so far from this collaboration and connection with the Road Ahead Cafe?
Thank you for bringing that up. So, this is the most fun I have every week on Thursday mornings when I get with Frank and Peter and we record this show. And I have to say that although the show has been very well received, it's before we actually hit record and after we're done with the show that some of the best stuff comes out. So I can hardly wait to, get some of those recordings and share them with the world because these two guys are so funny and they're so loving and they just give so much. And I think I'm the lucky one because I get to listen to them every week creating this show. And, the way we came together, we came together through Veronica in the Netherlands. And so that's how Frank and I met when he was the guest speaker one day at the Spin networking meeting. And he told the story about his father, who was a magician. And so later that day, he put a LinkedIn post up and I commented on it. And I was very excited about that story. And so I wanted to connect with him and he was fascinated that I was interested. So when we started to talk and Veronica had mentioned, I got this friend, Frank, and he's really looking for, connection with some spiritual folks and some thought leaders. And so immediately we connected and we were like brothers instantly. And then I connected him with Peter M. Fellows, who I had met at a mindfulness retreat. And I just connected Peter and Frank because I thought they'd be great together. And, a Dutchman and a Canadian, and I bring them together and they're all about wisdom and mindfulness and change facilitation and just loving, joyful men. Next thing you know, while they're talking, they say, we should probably do something with Rick and, let's get him involved in this. And why don't we do a podcast? So we got together. That was in April of 2021. And we didn't record our first episode until August. So that's how much planning we did. And we really did have a lot of fun. We got to know each other and all from different walks of life, very different lenses that we're looking at life through. But it's the most fun I have. I think, that's a great, as you mentioned, great example of connection We didn't have any goal at the time. We now do have a goal to really reach people and to be able to bring this message, which is how to have a better life through finding, again, that inner truth. What is coming from your heart and your mind and your spirit, and how we can integrate that.
That's really beautiful. And you are sharing so much knowledge and information, not only in the podcast, but today as well with us, and in everything that you do and every time you show up in any circumstance. And there is so much that you're giving to the world, and I am grateful to be able to learn from you. Rick, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I want to acknowledge you for everything that you're doing and the wisdom that you share, all the tips and the energy that you brought us today. And before we end, I have a series of 3 fast questions that I address to my guests. And once again, thank you for your time. And let's dig in. Are you ready?
Thank you so much, Alex. Sure, go ahead.
So what are you grateful for?
Wow, that's such a long list, but because I'm in the moment, I'm going to say I'm grateful for you in my life and to have a space on your path, because I think you are incredible. I think you are an angel on this earth. I think that the things that you do for people, especially children in schools and journaling, and all the things that you do for young and old are amazing. So I'm grateful for you today.
Thank you so much. How do you impress yourself?
I impressed myself by being consistent. When I was young, I was like this. I was up, I was down, I was up, I was down, and now I am like this. So I'm very impressed by my consistency and my persistence to that every day, doing the same thing and just being in the moment.
What is your definition for leave your impressivity?
So I think if I can inspire someone else to feel good about themselves wherever they are, I think that would be my definition.
You certainly inspire me. So thank you so much for that.
Alex.
This was it. Thank you so much for tuning again for another great episode of Live Your Impressivity Show podcast. I would love to hear what was your biggest takeaway from this episode and what you learned about emotional leadership that you will apply from tomorrow onwards. If you loved this episode, feel free to share it with your network, like, comment, and of course, subscribe to this podcast so that you are always the first one to listen to a new episode. Until next time, stay impressive, keep writing in your journal, and don't forget that love always conquers fear. I'll see you next time in Live Your Impressivity Show. I'm Alex Badica. Stay impressive.